bills, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It's a little bit bigger than popsicle stand.
This ain't Eddie Wade's popcorn stand.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is Monday, August 27th, 2018. It's 5:30 PM, and we are in the City Hall Council Chambers. Roll call, Patty.
Cyphers.
Present.
Hawkins.
Present.
Hassick.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Zarling.
Here.
It's been determined that we have a quorum, and we will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. First item is to approve tonight's agenda, and at your seat there was an addition of 13.2 for Grace Lutheran Church event of closing a street. And so is there please a motion to approve the agenda as presented with the addition of 13.2?
So moved.
Second.
Motion offered by Zarling and second by Hassick. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. 6.1, minutes from our last meeting, August 13th, which were included in your packet. Is there please a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Motion offered by Peters and second by Hawkins. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. 8.1, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities presentation, and Mike.
Yeah, I'd just like to introduce Bradley Peterson. Bradley's with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, does a lot of lobbying on our behalf, the legislature, and he's just going to update us on what the coalition's been doing and what he can do for us.
Very good. Thank you again. My name is Bradley Peterson, an attorney and lobbyist with the firm of Flaherty and Hood in St. Paul. We do the legislative advocacy and the organizational management for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Fairmont has been a member for a number of years now, and we're happy to have you. And as you know, we try to get out and visit as many of our CGMC cities every summer, fall as we can to give you a little bit of an update on what we've been up to at the legislature, get a sense for what's going on in our cities, and address any questions or concerns that you might have. So what I have distributed is our 2018 session report in terms of what we've been doing, and it gives you kind of the blow-by-blow. I'll hit some of the highlights and then maybe tee up a little bit of discussion about what we're doing now through the beginning of the next legislative session and kind of what we think the next legislative session will be focusing on. So as I go along, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, get my attention. I don't mind at all. So we'll go forward with that. As you probably already know, the coalition has about 100 members now. We have been growing, and we really focus on 5 issue areas at the legislature, specifically from a greater Minnesota perspective. And those are local government aid and property taxes, economic development, transportation, environmental regulatory infrastructure issues, and then annexation and land use. And so those are really what we focus in on, zero in on, introduce legislation, and work on behalf of Fairmont and other greater Minnesota communities on. So going into the last legislative session, of course, it was a non-budget year. They had done the budget in 2017 for this biennium. And so there were really 2 issues that the legislature really needed to focus on. The first, and the one that was of critical importance for our organization, was the bonding bill. It was a traditional year for a larger bonding bill in terms of investing in infrastructure. And then, of course, there was dealing with the federal tax changes that came through at the end of 2017 and how to align Minnesota's tax system with what the feds were doing. And obviously, that hits a whole set of issue areas that are not our bailiwick, but certainly impact our communities and the people that that live in them, but then also impacts what kind of revenue the state collects on an ongoing basis going forward. And so those were really kind of the 2 things that the legislature had. In addition, of course, 2018 is an election year. Every member of the State House of Representatives is up for election. Control of the state Senate is up because of a special election because of Lieutenant Governor Fischbach having to resign her seat. We've got 2 Senate seats, U.S. Senate seats up, the governor up, so it's a big year politically for Minnesota. And so because of the short session, the focus on the tax conformity issue, the election coming up, we really had sort of limited expectations for what we as an organization could realistically push, accomplish, and get done. But we did sort of work to sort of tee up some issues. The one thing where we really did focus on getting some work done for our greater Minnesota communities was in the issue of the infrastructure and the bonding bill. Specifically, there are a couple of programs that the coalition works on related to bonding. One is the Clean Water Grant and Loan programs that the Public Facilities Authority administers. We've been kind of on a dual track when it comes to environmental issues. One, being very critical of and pushing back where appropriate on the regulatory scheme here in the state of Minnesota, where it's not appropriate, where it's not getting us clean water, where it's cost prohibitive in some cases to meet those standards. We have an ongoing lawsuit with the EPA. But then also, too, on the other front of where it is appropriate and where communities do need to make infrastructure improvements, making sure that the funding is in place for those communities. And so in the dollar side of it, we supported Governor Dayton's $167 million for these clean water programs administered by the Public Facilities Authority. But we also went one step forward. If you've dealt with any of those programs, you know that there are caps, both in terms of dollars, how much dollars a community can get, and how much of a project that those grants and loans can pay for. And so we actually put forward, did some research and work on kind of how can we make sure that we can get more money to our communities where they have really expensive upgrades that they're required to do. When you've got a project of, 10, 20, 15, $25 million, $7 million does not necessarily, from the state, does not necessarily go very far. And so we put together a supplemental grant program that would help buy down the cost of some of these projects so that wastewater rates in our communities that participated in those programs would be no more than 2 times the metro average. We thought that that was a fairly generous benchmark in terms of the state's responsibility. While there was a lot of interest on a bipartisan basis and from the administration on the money side of it in terms of putting more money into the existing programs, we got a lot of good interest from the legislature on the supplemental grant program, but a lot of pushback from the Dayton administration, who did not think that it was a prudent idea to commit additional resources or to pay for larger chunks of these projects. And so while in the end of the day in the bonding bill we were able to get about $123 million for these PFA programs, the supplemental grant program kind of stalled out. But we did get some good traction at the legislature, and I think it's an issue that we are going to be continuing to discuss, because in some cases when you have to do these upgrades, when you're required to because of the regulatory scheme, they are really, really expensive. And the current programs do not necessarily help communities get to where they need to be in terms of paying for some of those. The other issue on the bonding bill, since I'm on it, is the Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure Grant Program, BDPI for short. That's a program that helps pay the public infrastructure costs of business development, business expansion in communities. Oftentimes, communities will use it to help build out their industrial parks, things like that. And so every now and again, the program needs to be refilled through the bonding bill. The grants are administered on a competitive basis by deed. And so last year, the legislature put $12 million into that program. This year, we asked for an additional 20, and the legislature, at the end of the day, got us 5. So there is money in that bucket. So if you do have a project that you think is eligible, could be eligible, definitely apply. It's a great program. Representative Gunther was our chief author in the House. CGMC recognized him this summer with an award for his work on economic development, both the BDPI piece and childcare. And so it's a good program. It's been a program that has served greater Minnesota communities really well. But again, every now and again, that bucket needs to be refilled. So that bucket has some in it. So if you've got a project, please, please, please look at trying to utilize those dollars. Since I'm on economic development, I'll talk a little bit about childcare, which is something that we've sort of grouped in with that issue. It occurs to me that several times when I've been in this room giving you a presentation, Tim Penny from the Southwest or Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation has also been here giving you an update on some of the things that organization is doing, and he's often talked about childcare. And so, within the last 3 years or so, it's certainly an issue that we've started to hear much more from our communities about, whether you're on the Iron Range and looking to build a facility that can run 24 hours because of the shift work in the mines, or down here in southern Minnesota. It's an issue that's confronting everybody. So we've started to, and this is one of those issues that we really started to talk about and tee up for next year, talk about childcare and what can be done on the issue. There have been a couple of bills that CGMC either worked with others or introduced ourselves. One is a bill that Tim Penny brought to give some funding to the initiative foundations to really piggyback on some work that they've been doing in terms of training up in-home childcare providers. Teaching them, how do you run your childcare service out of your home as a business? What regulations do you need to conform to? How do you make sure you get your staffing right? All of that goes into running an in-home childcare business. They've had great success with it here in southern Minnesota, and Mr. Penny wanted to take the program statewide with some state dollars. So we supported legislation that was a grant program for that. Again, Representative Gunther carried that legislation on behalf of the Initiative Foundations and us. There's a deed program that's currently existing that has been getting some money out to communities. And then the third thing that we worked on was a bonding bill that would help communities with the cost of building facilities in their community in terms of putting child care centers together. Unfortunately, none of those three went anywhere this year. The bonding bill was a new concept, so folks are getting used to it. The Initiative Foundation grant kind of got confused with the other deed grant. There was money for the deed grant in the supplemental budget bill, which ultimately was vetoed by Governor Dayton. So that's an issue that I expect that CGMC is going to be spending a lot more time on in the next several years, because it's right up there with workforce housing. It's one of those issues that is holding communities back. That if you don't have childcare and if you don't have housing, it's really hard to grow business and attract workers to your community. So that's one of the things that we'll be working on. As I mentioned, one of the issues that we spent some time on this year was the tax bill, and that's because that's where LGA is generally paid out of. The program is in statute, so it goes at its current level until the legislature changes it. So for the last several years, we've had legislation to increase the amount of funding by about $30.5 million to get up to the 2002 level of what LGA has been. And if you've been on the council for a while, you know that Fairmont has a history with local government aid for many years. After 2013, the city was actually losing money year after year after year. Working with city staff, Mr. Humple and others, we were able to sort of work out a solution and identify what we characterized as a flaw in the formula that was working against communities like Fairmont. And with the help of Representative Rosen and Senator Rosen, Representative Gunther, we were able to get a change a couple years ago. And so we've now stabilized Fairmont's LGA, so you won't be losing year after year. And if there is an increase in the overall appropriation, you'll be seeing some additional money. And so you can see, based on this green, the chart, the top chart there, the green bar, that's what Fairmont would have received under CGMC's LGA proposal. Of course, the issue with the tax bill was really, there was a lot of focus on federal conformity. That's what they should have been working on. That's what they needed to work on. There was seemingly a lot of agreement about how to get there, but at the end of the day, they just didn't. And there's, the blame game is certainly well played in St. Paul. And so depending on where you stand is who you're pointing the finger at. But it was really surprising that they were not able to get this worked out, because at least the basics of federal conformity of aligning Minnesota's tax system with the feds, there was some basic agreement on it. With some peripheral issues, I think, that got in the way. So that'll be an issue again next year. Going into next year, it will be a budget year. We'll have a new governor. We may have a new House of Representatives. And so there will be a lot of work done, first off, between now and then, to educate legislators. One of the things that the CGMC sees our role as during election season is to educate candidates on our issues. And so right after the filing for the primary in June, CGMC sent every individual who had filed, regardless of whether they were an incumbent, what party they were in, whoever was going to be on the ballot for the legislature, got a 27-page packet from CGMC on, here are our issues. Here's how local government aid works. Here's what the child care issue looks like in greater Minnesota. Here's how some of the infrastructure funding issues work. Here's how transportation is funded in the state of Minnesota. With the open invitation that if you have questions about it, ask us. We'll talk to anybody who has a question. Doesn't matter what party you are, whether you're incumbent, not. You have a question, we'll answer it. And so one of our roles has been to educate candidates. Another role that we serve is to make sure that the public understands where the candidates stand. And so one of the things that we did at our summer conference in July in Mankato was we hosted a gubernatorial candidate forum. We invited the 5 major candidates at the time. This was pre-primary. 3 of the 5 were able to attend, so Congressman Walz, Representative Murphy, and Commissioner Johnson were there. We had 500 people from the community and our members there put on an hour-and-a-half discussion of greater Minnesota issues. So we talked to them about LGA and childcare and clean water issues and transportation and all of that, and got a good sense for where candidates were at and engaged with candidates. And that's really, I think, kind of what it takes. So going into next year, like I said, big year, budget year, new governor, potentially changes at the legislature. We're going to be focusing on LGA, infrastructure, childcare, and then playing defense on a number of issues as well to make sure that greater Minnesota communities are not harmed in the crossfire. Otherwise, there's a pretty full kind of chart in your packet on kind of all of the things that we worked on. There's a pretty significant write-up on the wastewater activities, accomplishments, all the things we did on the regulatory front and the status of some of those efforts, and then a save the date for our upcoming events. As you know, we do a summer and fall conference. Fall conference is coming up in Alexandria in November. It'll be after the election, so one of the things that we'll do is we'll kind of unpack who won, why, and what does it mean, and then talk about the specific policies that we want to advance at the legislature. So it's very much a working meeting in terms of going through our policies and figuring out what our agenda for the next session is going to be. Legislative Action Day, where we bring everybody to St. Paul to lobby the legislature, is a great opportunity to get briefed on the issues after session starts, meet with your legislators, and then enjoy some time at Mancini's afterwards with your fellow Greater Minnesota city people, and then also we invite the entire legislature as well. And then our summer conference next year is going to be in Bemidji, and so that'll be a good event as well. With that, I will pause and take any questions or comments that you have, but again, I really want to reiterate my appreciation for being able to be here to update you on what we've been up to.
A couple things that made me think of something in regards to bonding. We have 2 projects I'm thinking about. I have no idea if that's something that we should have you involved with or not. It just came to mind as you were speaking. We're in the process of putting together a community center project. And there's been talk off and on about bonding, and some people think you should do it, some people, is that something that is appropriate, or is that something that you guys would help a community with a community center? Does that come under the economic development or not?
Well, so 2 questions, or 2 answers in there. First off is the sort of, is it appropriate to approach the state for bonding dollars? Absolutely. A lot of communities do. It's the sort of thing where you don't get if you don't ask. And it sounds like, talking to the mayor and Mr. Humple, that there's been some pretty good community discussion already about what a community center project might look like. And so from that perspective, having your ducks in a row before you go to the legislature is very helpful. In terms of lobbying the actual project, a lot of communities will hire our firm on an individual basis to do that work for them. From the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities perspective, the thing that we're looking out for is to make sure, is the bonding bill balanced, and does it include a good sprinkling of Greater Minnesota projects? We'll keep you apprised if we know you've got a project of kind of what's going on with it as it's going along, but we don't necessarily, in our role as the CGMC, do bonding on behalf of individual communities, but sometimes communities will hire our firm for that sort of thing.
Then that would probably play the same, other question would be, and we have some long-term behind projects to do with flooding. We have 2 areas of flooding in town that would come under stormwater management, and that'd be the same kind of thing. We could hire you to help us if we wanted to try to get bonding, because we're talking pretty big dollars, but that doesn't come under anything that you do. 'Cause
That's
It's
correct.
an individual city thing, right?
Yep,
Okay, cool, thank you, appreciate it.
yep.
Any other questions for Bradley? Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Appreciate the time. Good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to 9.1, a public hearing for ordinance 2018-16 administrative citations. And at this time, I'll open the public hearing, and we will begin with Mike.
This is a change in our city code to basically what we're trying to do with administrative citations is streamline our process. So, and as you know, we've asked some folks to be appeal hearing judges or administrative hearing judges. And in our code right now, it says they can appeal to the city council. It seems to city staff that if we're going to streamline the process and a person has the right to appeal to this administrative judge that's working for the city, that should be the final say and not the council. So what we have in front of you is an ordinance that basically streamlines the process to give all of the final say to the administrative hearing officer rather than the council. And then if a person was not satisfied with that, then they could in turn petition district court to take the subject up. So with that, so it's basically, those are the changes that are in the ordinance. It puts the administrative hearing officer as the final say instead of the council. That's what this is about tonight.
Okay. And this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to address the council at this public hearing? Hearing none, is there please a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion offered by
Second.
Peters and second by Hawkins. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Next one would be, is there a motion, please, to approve ordinance number 2018-16?
So moved.
Motion offered by Cyphers
Second.
and second by Hawkins. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Patty.
Cyphers,
Yes.
Hassick,
Yes.
Hawkins,
Yes,
Peters,
Yes.
Zarley.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
so I have a quick question, if this is okay to bring it up now. How is this gonna be, how is it different than what we did before? How are these, any of these citations going to be approached, or especially, I'm thinking more of the ones that are the kind of the blighted housing, those kind of things that people call about. Is there gonna be any different approach to approaching those issues than they are now, or are we gonna use the same processes? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I think, yes, pretty much the same process. We have to give anybody that's first we have to tell them they're in violation and give them, 10 days or so
Right.
to clear things up. And then with that, this just allows us to issue an administrative citation. It's not a criminal ticket. It doesn't go to district court. So basically, we're saying, we're able to find them and collect that in a more streamlined manner. And our deal isn't to collect money, but it's to gain compliance. And hopefully, this will streamline that. But what you see often is that we will give an individual 10 or 15 days to clean something up. They don't do it. We issue a criminal citation. They have to appear in court. That sometimes takes 2-3 weeks before they have to appear in court after we find that they didn't comply. The judge oftentimes says, okay, 30 days or, and so it stretches it out. We may eliminate that second time around to give the person time to clean it up. The other thing it does, it allows us to go in there and say, okay, you're halfway cleaned up, give them another 7 days if they're working to comply, so.
Do you have, or will there be some kind of set schedule that once you've approached them the first time, you'll give them so many days? Is there gonna be a follow-up at that time?
Oh,
or-
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right,
And the second time, we will go, we visit each time, take pictures. First time, we send the pictures and a section of the code that says you're in violation of this, you have so many days to clean it up. The second time around, we'll actually we'll go at the end of those 10 days, physically go look at the property, physically talk to the person, and if it's not cleaned up, why not? And at that time, that person can decide.
I just remember in some of the reading of the initial stuff you put out, I thought you'd mentioned that there were gonna be a number of people on staff that could give a citation that was maybe different than before.
Right now, because it's a criminal citation, you have to be a licensed peace officer to issue the citation. So our animal control code enforcement officer does that. So Megan, our planner, zoning technician, calls Dustin and says, it's time to issue this citation.
Right.
She would be able to issue the citation.
Yeah, or
The
you
the
could,
city
or
clerk,
some,
I could, there's 4 or 5 people that,
Right,
or
right,
staff members that could, so.
Right.
Won't have to wait. We can.
so the idea then, that this should speed up this whole process quite a bit.
That's what we're hopeful of, yes.
Okay.
And so
Well, somebody who was privy to the legal system could drag this out 6 months.
Oh,
No,
well, I
Right?
mean, all of you, I mean, a perfect example of multiple years drug out is our blighted housing. 304 Woodland finally came down today.
it did.
That took several years as a result of this, so.
Right,
Whether, this is a fine or else, so that would have probably ended up in district court anyway.
right. Okay, so then something like, for example, the one example that we've talked about, like in this, on Hampton, this trailer that's been in the backyard for, what is it, Dave, a couple of years? 18 months. What, in that situation, once that's reported, what's the likelihood for timeline that would be gone? And what steps would have to take for, in that instance, how fast can you accelerate, how fast
Well,
can you
we
accelerate?
can issue the citation sooner and then go from there. Where we issue the citation under the criminal system, they go to they wait for their day in court, have their day in court, and that kind of
Right.
adds the days to it.
Right, exactly.
And I was told today, just on the subject of the trailer, that it should be gone in the morning. Because that person will appear in court tomorrow morning as well.
Okay.
So, but they were, part of the delay has been moving that trailer, has been where to put it. It's hard to find a place to throw away a 18-foot camper trailer. So, but
So the
it
point,
should
but
be
the
gone
point
tomorrow.
is that those things can happen, and you can give them a certain amount of time. Is there anything in here that said how much time we have to give them? You can decide that internally, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, and you can decide to shorten it up the second time if it doesn't
Oh,
seem like they're even caring.
correct,
to comply.
right.
Okay, so you have some flexibility.
Yeah, it offers flexibility and it takes the criminal part out of the process,
Right,
so.
and is it more likely than in this process, from what I understand, that in cases where you have a landlord-tenant situation, rental, that you'll get the landlord involved sooner, that they might have an interest in helping to get it, where in the court system, they're less likely?
Well, we get the landlord involved when we don't see the renter taking the necessary steps. In regard to that trailer, the landlord has been involved in working with us on that. So, what we determine is, if the landlord's not working with us, then we look at citing both the landlord and the
Okay.
tenant.
That was my comment to Mike when we were talking about this, is that why do we even deal with the renter? That really our responsibility should be with the person that owns that land, because you would think that they would want that taken care of in a much more timely manner sometimes than the renter does. And if we follow this process, 10 days that they give the renter, and then it doesn't happen, and then you give the landlord 10 days, and now you're into almost a month before any kind of action happens. And so that was my thought, was that why even mess with the renter and go right to the landlord from the very
Unless
beginning?
it's a statute that way.
I think maybe Libby could explain, well, you can't issue a citation to a landlord that isn't really violate, a car that's unlicensed and inoperable is not the,
Well,
help me out
if
there.
you've rented the property to a person,
the tenant has certain rights to the property. You know, they have the right of peaceful enjoyment, and they have the right to live there and do whatever, and they have the right to be treated like adults.
Yeah.
So if they've created the problem, I think that it just makes sense to go to the person, the tenant, who created the problem in the first place. As Mike said, you know, if that person isn't going to act like an adult, then you move on to the landlord, who can then bring pressure upon them in terms of the status of their lease and things like that to remedy the situation.
Yep.
But tenants have rights too, and so we should treat them like they do.
Yep. Okay.
And if somebody's a jerk, we still can't hook onto their stuff and drag it out legally.
Correct.
Right.
So this is hopefully
Well, yeah,
it's not gonna fix
currently.
everything.
I suppose there's some things you could do, like if you wanted to accelerate that process, as you were mentioning, Mayor, you could probably change the rental code to go to the landlord right away. Rather than, you could do that if you choose to
No.
change. Why
Well, I don't think
Because the
so,
rental
because
contract gives, as Libby says, gives that renter certain rights, and we cannot legislate those rights away. If I rent something from you, I somewhat become the owner, and you'd have to explain it, but I have, you cede that property to the lessor, or the lessee, excuse me. That's just how it works. It's just how it works.
Well, and the other side of our rental ordinance is our action toward the landlord is taking his license to
Right.
rent that piece of property. Well, with that also comes the unintended consequences of evicting this person, and there is a certain amount of time required to do that, and so we're looking at more than 30 days, so
Right.
it is complicated. I think what we want to do is ensure that the landlords are willing to participate in solving the problem, and that we address the person violating our city code first before we move forward. And what we're finding is, we have a lot of good landlords here that are willing to work with us and work through some of those problems. But then, them like us, we can't force people always to do things we want them to do in our time frame.
Well, the main thing, hopefully, that this will be able to at least speed up the process, that we'll get things, complied with faster, because eventually, if nobody does anything, it'll end up on, the landlord will pay it. If it's a landlord situation, the landlord will pay it with his taxes, right?
Correct.
Any fines that aren't paid, so, they'll be involved somehow anyway, so. But anyway, thanks for the work you did on, putting this together. I think this will help a lot, and we'll see how it goes.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to 9.2, a public hearing this time for Resolution 2018-25, vacating a portion of 13th Street and alleys. And at this time, I'd like to open up this public hearing, and we will begin with Mike.
During the process of the sale of Old Lincoln School, there was a title issue. There's nothing recorded that we vacated 13th Street and a portion of an alley on that property. The school was built over 13th Street, so someone gave them permission to do it a long time ago. There's just no record of that, so what we'd like to do is, through this public hearing and our process of vacation, create a record of vacating that, so that when the new entity buys the Lincoln School, they have proper title.
Okay. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to address the council on the public hearing? Hearing none, is there please a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll move.
Motion offered by Zarling.
Second.
And second by Hasek. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. The next one would be is there a motion please to approve Resolution 2018-25, vacating a portion of 13th Street and alleys?
So moved.
Motion offered by Peters
Second?
and second by Cyphers. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, it is a roll call vote. Please, Patty.
Zarling,
Yes.
Cyphers,
Yes.
Hassick,
Yes.
Hawkins,
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
The resolution has passed. 13.1, event permit for Freedom to Worship 2018. And Mike.
Jamie Keeker is planning a public worship event, September 8th, 2018 at Sylvania Park Band Shell with live performers, worship teams, spoken word, and keynote speakers. This is a special event in our park, requires a permit. Staff recommends approval.
Is there a motion, please, to approve an event permit for Jamie Keeker, Freedom to Worship 2018 for September 8th, 2018?
I'll make the motion.
Motion offered by Hassick.
Second.
And second by Peters. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. 13.2, Grace Lutheran Church event. Mike.
This event will be on September 9th, 10:30 to 2. Grace Lutheran Church would like to block Grant Street between Tilden and Webster for that few-hour period for an event from the church. God's grace is amazing. Staff recommends approval.
Is there a motion, please, to allow Grant Street to be blocked off from Tilden Street and Webster Street Court for the event on September 9th, 2018, from 10:30 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m.?
So moved.
Motion offered by
Second.
Cyphers and second by Hassick. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. 15.1, Airport Grant Agreement for the FAA and Troy.
Evening, Mayor and Council. The city has received a grant offer from the FAA to complete or for a portion of the design work relating to the new T-hangar and associated taxi lanes out at the airport. This grant would cover approximately 90% of the anticipated design costs. City's currently under contract with KLJ to have the design completed for that work, so staff is recommending approval. The Airport Advisory Board is also recommending acceptance of this offer. Be happy to answer any questions on it.
Hearing none, is there please a motion to authorize the mayor and the city attorney to sign a grant agreement for design of a new hangar and associated taxi lanes at the municipal airport?
So moved.
Motion offered by Zarling,
Second?
second by Cyphers. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. 15.2, award contract for 2018-B improvement project. And Troy, this is yours too.
Yes, bids were opened for the Cedar Creek Park Trail Extension on August 16th. Received several bids. In the bidding process, we actually bid two alternatives, a concrete surface and a bituminous surface. Did an evaluation on the life cycle cost based on the bids that were in, and staff is recommending to proceed with the concrete surface for this trail extension. Ground Zero Services of Cortland was a low bidder at $340,548.75. Both the bids from Ground Zero were below the engineer's
Oh, good.
estimate.
That was, thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Troy at this time? Hearing none, is there please a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-16 as presented?
So move.
Motion offered by Hawkins
Second?
and second by Cyphers. Is there any further discussion? And this is a roll call vote, please, Patty.
Hassick,
No.
Hawkins,
Yes.
Peters,
No.
Zarling,
Yes.
Cyphers.
Yes.
The resolution is passed. 16.1, accounts payable, and Mike.
I'll just ask for approval for this August bills to be paid.
Is there a motion, please, to approve payment of the August 2018 bills?
So moved.
Motion offered by Peters
Second?
and second by Cyphers. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. 17, Mike, I'll let you go first.
I guess I just want to let everybody know I'm still in the evaluation process on our outdoor entertainment timing. I finished, kind of going through and seeing what other cities were doing. I'm just formulating my recommendation to the council, and I thought that let Labor Day come and go and summer wane, and when we do have this discussion, maybe it will be less emotional, but I will have a recommendation here shortly for the council and provide information on what other communities are doing that you can weigh, and we'll go
Appreciate that.
from there.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to address the council at this time?
Maybe you want us to talk a little bit, say something about the comprehensive plan.
Oh, sure, we're updating our comprehensive plan, and our first meeting will be the 29th, starting at 6 o'clock. Several invitations were mailed out. They were mailed a few days later than they should have been by our consultant, so it seemed like there was a short time there, but a lot of the people that we invited or have said they wanted to participate in that, I think we're planning on that date, but we will apologize and get those notices out in a more timely fashion at the next one. But it will be at 6 o'clock, Wednesday, the 29th. It is a public meeting, so if you're interested in planning for our community, you can certainly show up and see if there's an interest, and if you're interested, we'll certainly allow people to sit on the committee and be involved. There will be not only online public engagement and participation, but we'll have at least 2 full public meetings where we will have a much larger room than this set up somewhere where people can look at maps and ideas and what's coming from the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee and our consultants.
And it's a long process.
It is. We're planning right at 18 months, so.
Thank you.
Anything else, council members?
Yeah, I'd like to just ask a question about, a month or so, a couple months ago, I got some concerns from people, and then another one here just in the last month about people who buy a home on the lake in town, and then they start cutting down all kinds of trees on their lake bank, and I think there's still something going on, and I just, have you heard anything more about the ones in the last few weeks, or?
Well, I think most of those, I think there were 4 that didn't have any contact with the city and 2 that did. You know, out evaluating them, they all look pretty good at this point. What we've tried to do is educate folks. And so what we're asking, and anybody wants to do any work in their lake bank, come in and talk to city staff. I met with some of the tree trimmers that said, you know, if it looks like you're gonna cut a lot, you don't have to say no, but suggest to the homeowner that maybe they contact City Hall before they start the project. But, you know, there are ways a person can clear some of the lake bank, leaving a canopy above, but getting rid of the buckthorn that's an invasive species along the lake bank, clean that up and replant. We have one of those. They have the proper filter blanket down and those sorts of things. So, yeah, I think there was some that got a little overzealous at the beginning of the year, but looking back at these now, they all are looking like they're in pretty good shape. The growth's coming back, and letters went out to all of those people that said, you know, here are the rules. Here's the section out of our code that tells you what you can do, and there's also information in there on replanting and what to plant from the DNR, and then DNR suggestions.
Well, I guess I was talking to a couple of the Lakes Commission members about it, and of course, obviously, Lakes Commission members are gonna be more exercised than most, because they have a better understanding about that. And so, just in talking to them, we kind of talked about some ideas, and something I'd like to maybe have us consider doing that might be a little bit of work at the beginning, but probably long-term wouldn't be, maybe ideally, and maybe a backup one if we don't want to do the first one. But I think we need to have a form letter of explanation plus a copy of the Lakeshore Management Ordinance that we should have printed, and every closing for any lake home that is given to them at closing, so that they know. That means we talk about we need to inform people. It's hard to. The best way to inform them is that when they buy a lake home, when they take ownership of a lake home, that this is given to them in their documents with their paper signing, and to explain to them. You know, I just think that we need to find a way to do that. I think it'd be some expense up front to maybe print some or have some, but it can't be more than 1 or 2 or 3 a month of transactions that happen with a lake home. I mean, I think people, you know, people need to know, a lot of people, I didn't know till I started hearing about this since being on the council, that there are rules of what you can do on your lake bank. you know, and not everybody knows that, and obviously, with some of the ones that happened early, when they cut too much, they didn't know, because I don't think they were trying to do anything against the city, they just didn't realize it. So I think we should do something like that to inform people by having something that we require that everybody have when they buy a lake home, you know, and if we can't figure out an easy way to do that, at least get the realtors involved and have that information for the realtors to give to anybody who's buying a lake home. I think it's incumbent upon us, and I guess the Lakes Foundation people feel, you know, would feel a lot better about it, because they were really upset over some of these that happened. I think that we need to at least make it easy for these people who are buying a lake home to know right up front, here's the rules when you own a home on the lake, here's what you can do with your lake bank, and here's not. If you got any questions, call Mike Humpel at City Hall. You know, I think it's just, I don't think it'd be that hard to do. I think we should figure out a way to do that. So if you want to.
I think it's important that we educate people, but, you know, when I look at the number of lake banks that had work done on them, unfortunately, some of those were done by people that have lived in those homes for quite a long time. They weren't just all new homeowners.
True.
So what we need to do is probably get information out to, I think there's 460 lake properties. You know, it's something that we could, rather than try to put that, you know, let people know. We can have a direct mailing or something.
Yeah, we could do that.
Puts that out, but-
That'd actually be better the first time.
But I think the important thing, and I was on the radio a week ago talking about, if you have a lake bank project, because it's not just tree trimming. It's, what if I want to riprap? What can I riprap with?
Right.
How do I do it? I want to build stairs. You can build stairs and you can actually clear trees for a path for your stairs. So there's things you can do, and I think the message to get out is, if someone has a lake bank and they want to do anything, they should contact City Hall. We should come out, look at what they want to do, and talk to them about
I think it's a
how
great
to
idea
do
to
that.
do a one mailing, or, you know, a set of mailings for a few months to get them all out, you know. On the other hand, I don't think it's a bad idea to, anytime there's a transaction, let somebody know, somebody moves in from out of town, they'll follow it, or.
And we can certainly get the local
Looking at,
realtors
see if it's not
a
a big burden
packet,
for the city, yeah.
you know, several packets to have in their office, and
Right.
they can hand those
you
out to
go.
people that are looking at lake bank. Sure, well, absolutely. Education, I think, is the key there.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Anything else? My only comment was, Troy, thank you for or actually to Nick, I believe, was the one that sent out, after Counselor Hasek requested a list of all the streets the potholes were going to be filled. Thank you for that list. I was overwhelmed by that list. I had no
No kidding.
idea that there were so many projects that the city were working on, and I think the community needs to know that. It just takes so much time to get to all those projects, but there was quite a list there, and so thank you to you and to Nick for getting that out. Okay, anything else?
I would just add
Oh,
that
sure.
rain wasn't a big help for
Right,
Nick and the
exactly.
crews this year. I think they had Winnebago east of Highway 15 scheduled 3 different times over the last 2 weeks, and each time they had it scheduled, it rained, so they had to slide it back, so.
Exactly. They're doing the best they
Rain's
can.
not our friend, just like winter snow beats
Exactly.
them up, and they gotta fix it in the rain in the summer.
Exactly. Okay. Is there please a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Motion offered by Cyphers. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Zarly.
No one wants to leave.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carried, and the meeting is adjourned.